I very recently watched The Couple Next Door, which was a show that very recently aired on Channel 4. And the premise is two couples move in next door to each other. One is a very kind of sexually liberated swinger couple, the other is a very conservative religious couple, and sexy shenanigans happen. The premise seemed quite promising. It seemed like a very sexy show. And having seen it, I am gonna just spoil everything for you because I watched it so that you don't have to. This has got to top Yumi Her as the worst non-monogamy show of all time. And I don't say that lightly because Yumi Her was quite bad. I don't think I've ever been so excited to watch something and then been so thoroughly disappointed by the result. There were several scenes at the start where I was like, oh, this could be good, and by the end I was horrified. Absolutely fucking horrified. And let's fucking get into it, shall we? Like I said, this show it starts, with kind of four central characters. I've fucking forgotten their names now, but let's call them the sexy couple, so sexy man and sexy woman. And then there's the more kind of conservative couple, conservative man, conservative woman. And it says a lot that I watched this show barely 2 or 3 weeks ago and I've already forgotten all the character names. That's how incredibly unmemorable the show is to me. And I can't tell if it's because the show was just so bad that I've just forgotten it, or if it's so bad that, my brain has erased the trauma, honestly. So even though this show was a fucking train wreck, I do think that there are several themes that I thought were interesting and worth exploring, which is why I'm bothering to make this video. Because, this is not a video to make you watch the show. This is more a video to just analyze how non-monogamy is seen by people who, the writers were clearly not non-monogamous. To see how kind of non-monogamy is perceived by the mainstream, I suppose, and what people think it's like and what people want to see. So yeah, like I said, the premise of the show is, these two couples move in next to each other. And the conservative couple, when the show starts, they're pregnant. The woman is pregnant. They're expecting, after having tried for a really long time, they resorted to IVF. As it turns out, the conservative man has some insecurities about, the baby not being biologically his. And masculine pride actually ends up being quite a significant theme throughout this 6 to 8 episode series. They move in and, the kind of sexy couple, they're like, oh yeah, new blood. That was something that really bothered me as well. The portrayal of the sexy couple is, very sexualized, they get very overly friendly with the conservative couple the moment they meet. They're constantly PDAing in front of them. There's just a constant kind of sexual energy that I really don't think is very representative of, a lot of people in the non-monogamous community. I think that, we're a horny bunch, but we're not inappropriately horny, especially if we're not sure if the company that we're keeping are going to be accepting, especially if the context isn't right for you to just randomly make out with your partner, in that scenario. And especially not when this other couple that you're dealing with are monogamous. You don't want to make it look like you're disrespectful of their marriage. But there were several instances in this show where I did feel that writers clearly thought that non-monogamous people just didn't respect boundaries. So that was a little bit disturbing to me. Back to the masculine pride bit. From the moment they move in, there's a part where the conservative guy is struggling to lift a fridge or something. And the man from the sexy couple, who's, I don't know, some bodybuilder type person, helps out. And there's immediately a kind of bit of tension between the men because the conservative guy feels a little bit emasculated. Which I think is really interesting because whenever I see, kind of more right-wing people online talking about polyamory, they always focus on men and masculinity and how, it's not manly to share your woman, with another person. There's issues of paternity kind of type stuff. There's weirdness around dick size and penetrative sex and, kind of possessiveness of your partner. I think that people, when they're unlearning mononormativity, they have to unpack a lot of possessiveness that is taught to us in relationships. But I do feel that the struggle is twofold when you are a man or masculinized person, because yeah, there's kind of so much more like possession, and not only that, but it's also kind of defining your worth as a man and as your masculinity. And so, yeah, like the fact that, you know, from the jump, there's already kind of this weird, like, manly kind of one-upping kind of weird shit going on between the guys. You know, I was like, oh, this will be interesting. And then it goes completely off the rails. So about partway through the show, like I said, the conservative couple, they're pregnant, and unfortunately the lady miscarries. And, you know, this is dealt with like quite a lot of sensitivity. I thought, you know, like the emotions of it and, you know, the grief. And when this happens, you know, the conservative lady goes to the sexy lady for comfort. And yeah, like kind of through this trauma, the four of them actually become quite close friends. I also found this death as the turning point a really interesting moment, because I quote Esther Perel a lot in my videos, as you've probably noticed by now. And something that Esther Perel has said a lot is that desire is the antidote to death. And, you know, in her book, The State of Affairs, where she talks about infidelity, why it happens, you know, how it's a very nuanced issue, she mentions how, for a lot of her clients, infidelity would happen after there had been some brush with mortality, you know, in the family. So, for example, if a family member died, or yeah, like if there was like a miscarriage, or someone just came close to looking death in the face and you know, kind of looking at their own life and their own mortality. Because the thing about recognizing that your life is short is that you suddenly want to carpe diem. And I do think that when this miscarriage happened, yes, it was very sad, but it also suddenly kind of created this mentality where the conservative couple, especially the women in the couple, were like, fuck it, you know, I'm going to live my life, you know, as fully as possible, you know, because partly because I'm, you know, in grief and kind of acting out in strange ways, but also because I'm trying to kind of live like for like these people who've been gone. Anyway, in around like episode 2 or something, the sexy couple eventually reveal to the conservative couple that they're in an open marriage. They have been for a while, and they talk about it very positively. You know, they get the usual questions like, don't you get jealous? And there's actually quite like a good scene. You know, I was like, oh, this is actually quite a positive portrayal of non-monogamy. Little did I know. But the interaction between them is very sweet, actually. The conservative couple are very respectful with their questions. They're not like super invasive. They're very apologetic. They're like, you know, they're very much giving the vibe of like, yeah, I'm curious, but I don't want to kind of use up any emotional labor that you're not kind of at capacity to give. It's a very great interaction between them where they ask about jealousy and they're like, no, you know, we kind of don't feel it, and, you know, we're very secure. And yeah, I was like, oh wow, you know, like a non-monogamous couple that is actually portrayed as, you know, sane and healthy for once. There's like more and more bits of sexual tension between them, particularly between the conservative lady and the sexy man. This bond between them that's kind of like simmering under the surface eventually leads to both couples having separate conversations about like what they're going to do about this situation. So, you know, when the sexy couple have a conversation, they're like, you know, they're like, no, we can't get with this couple. We have a no friends rule. And it's really interesting because, yeah, like a lot of swinger couples do have something like that. And, you know, I have to make clear here that this sexy couple next door, they are swingers. They're not polyamorous. And I feel the discussions that they have here are kind of very indicative of the differences between polyamory culture and swinging culture, because swinging culture is generally a lot more conservative. Sex is for sex's own sake. You know, there's kind of no feelings involved. There's a lot of like very strict rules, you know, like in swinging, there's kind of different terms for kind of different types of group sex that people like to have. There's like soft swaps for people who kind of, you know, want to engage in a little bit of play, but there's no kind of fully penetrative sex with the person who isn't your usual partner. And then there's kind of like full swaps, which is, yeah, like kind of do anything and everything. Obviously there's kind of more like cuckolding, bull dynamics. There's, you know, like stag and vixen kind of type things, like hot wifing. There's a lot of like very specific roles that people operate in, which is not the case with polyamory, where I feel like things are a lot more fluid and are in fact encouraged to be. So anyway, this swinger couple, like, they have very strict rules on kind of the kind of people that, they can engage with. And they're like, no, we have a no friends rule. We don't want to make it complicated. We're not going to do that. And meanwhile, with the conservative couple, they're also discussing, how they both have, like, some desire for kind of the respective members of the other couple. Everyone here is heterosexual, by the way. And the woman seems a lot more open-minded to it, whereas the man seems a little bit more reticent. Obviously, shit goes down. They have like a weekend away, like they have like a spa weekend away together, and shit happens. But one thing that was super problematic is that the two women, they have a little bit of a one-to-one. And the conservative woman lies to the sexy woman and says that her partner had given the green light for them to proceed with opening up their marriage, when that was not the fucking case. Like, they had a conversation that was like full of tension, and yeah, like the guy was clearly very reluctant. So I'm not really sure what the conservative lady's deal was here. I think maybe she was just kind of going against his desires because she felt that he was lying, and so she was trying to kind of push him out of his comfort zone or something. But anyway, she lies to the sexy lady and is like, yeah, you can pursue my husband, like, he's given the green light. I think it's all good. Anyway, so they start the swap, and obviously it goes fucking disastrously. Something that was really weird about that really took me out of this show, was the fact that the swap happened in separate rooms. Like, as in, it's not all four of them playing together and kind of witnessing each other and stuff. It's like, conservative lady and sexy man goes off into another room and have sex, while the sexy lady and conservative man are like, they do their thing in the room that they were all hanging out in. And I'm like, why? What was the purpose of that? People don't usually fuck in separate rooms when you do a swap like that. What's the point? Like, I feel like the whole point of group sex is to watch your partner get fucked or fuck someone else. And so, yeah, like, that was really weird. And that was the moment I was like, okay, this show's not written by non-monogamous people. Fucking hell. Like, there was something so mononormative about that scene, like, that they couldn't do a group sex scene with all four of them present. Like, it had to be like, oh, but it's, like, sex has to be one-on-one, like, even when they're swapping partners. What the fuck? So anyway, they go off to another room, right? And they have like super hot, super passionate sex. And then meanwhile, like, the sexy woman's coming on to the conservative guy. And at some point, even though he is clearly attracted to her, he's like, oh, no, this feels wrong. Like, I can't do it. And she seems very disappointed. But then, like, the other couple just keep fucking, and they just keep, like, just letting them. And this was the point where I was just like, this is very strange. I don't really know what is going on here. And then it gets worse, because essentially, yeah, like, with the conservative lady and the sexy man, like, they have this very hot, passionate sex scene. And then the condom breaks, and she's like, oh no, it's fine, I'm on the pill. And so, like, he's like, okay, and then they have sex, without a condom, and he comes inside her. And at this point, I was like, whoa, what the fuck? Because, I mean, firstly, I don't think she was on the pill. And secondly, even if she was, I feel like it's still not okay to just be like, yeah, like, fuck me without a condom, I'll just kind of talk to my partner about it later. I feel like they made the classic rookie mistake of like, oh, I'll just, ask for forgiveness later rather than asking for permission. Or maybe not permission, but just like, notification, And that's another thing, right? There was fucking no negotiation before getting into it, which, another classic mistake, right? Like, I feel like with group sex, particularly if it's your first time having group sex and your first time opening up your marriage, you need to be having more conversations about this rather than just being like, oh, this might be a good idea, let's go do it. Yeah, so this is ridiculous, but, it's a train wreck I can't look away from. And then it gets more wild. So at some point, the conservative couple go and visit the conservative lady's family, who, as it turns out, are part of, like, some really culty religion. Evangelical, super traditional, contraception is bad kind of Christians. They were extremely disapproving of the fact that they had to use IVF, and, when they found out that she had a miscarriage, they kind of imply that it was her fault, which is really shitty and misogynistic. And so, yeah, like, she clearly holds a lot of resentment and anger towards her family for not supporting her when she's going through so much grief, for kind of piling on the grief, even. And so that's a very interesting family dynamic there. And also, just as a side note, I know that there are quite a lot of people couple who you know, previously like were part of like a really oppressive religion and then are now like, you know, the kinkiest, most left-wing motherfuckers ever. And I just find that really fucking funny. You know, the harder you go in one direction, the harder you overcorrect. Anyway, at some point it is revealed that the conservative lady is pregnant by the guy in the sexy couple. And at this point I'm like, oh my god, she wasn't on the fucking pill. I fucking knew it. Why is she doing this? Why did she say yes to just him coming inside? What the fuck is this? And then there are like these late night trysts, like where like, you know, she goes to like the sexy man and she's like, hey, you know, let's keep doing this. And at first he's like, no, this is really wrong. Like, go back to your partner. Like, you know, like you're clearly not okay. But anyway, at some point, like, they end up cheating behind their respective partners' backs. And there's also like another dimension here where like the sexy guy is like going through some shit as well. Like, turns out there's a baby that he had with another woman, you know, before he got with his current partner that she doesn't know about. And like she comes back into his life, and so he's like getting reacquainted with his son. And also he's involved in some like illegal drug deal type situation that he's also not telling his wife about to make some more money on the side. And so clearly like the cracks in their relationship are showing, and he's hiding things from her. She's starting to suspect a little bit, so you know, he's being a little bit shady. And so yeah, like, you know, by the time they get to the point where they actually cheat on their respective partners, like things have fractured in both their marriages. And I was so incredibly disappointed by this because, you know, in the first couple of episodes, it was like, you know, setting up the sexy couple was like quite like a healthy relationship. And I feel like they just did that just to break it down and be like, oh, you know, non-monogamous people always say that, you know, things are going well in their relationship, but actually, you know, they're cheaters and liars just like the rest of us. And I'm like, there's also actually another whole plot going on where there's a guy, you know, who lives on their street who is like a stalker, but like I'm not even gonna get into that because like the stalker subplot just ends up being so completely fucking irrelevant that I feel like they just threw that in there for shock value. It's becoming increasingly clear that this has gone beyond like a swinging swap situation, and that like, you know, like the woman and the man from the respective couples are getting more acquainted with each other, and you know, things are kind of fracturing in their initial marriages, which is, you know, going back to what I said earlier about this show being incredibly mononormative for a show that's about non-monogamy, it really pissed me off. But the most batshit part of all of this is that, yeah, like the conservative lady goes back to her family and she's like, surprise, I'm pregnant. And they're like so happy for her. They're like, oh my God, you know, we knew you didn't need to rely on IVF or whatever. But then she tells her father, oh, you know, I had sex out of wedlock. And, you know, I did what you wanted me to do, Dad. Like, I got pregnant, you know, the natural way. And I had to do it with a man who wasn't my husband because, you know, there was no way that I could do it with my husband. And so, you know, are you happy for me now? And this one, I was just like, I have lost the plot. What the fuck is going on? Because like, so it turns out that like she engaged in this non-monogamy thing, and got pregnant by this guy because what? She has daddy issues? Insane. Fucking insane. What the fuck? So obviously her dad is pissed. And then, you know, she ends up in this situation where like she's visiting her parents because she like had a fight with her husband. So like, you know, she stays in like her parents' like little kind of cabin in the woods. You know, not ominous at all. And then I think she like lies to the other three about the fact that like her dad's like trapped her in the cabin and he's super mad. He found out like everything and whatever. And then so the three of them come running. And then also there are guns now, like apparently like the dad is like really pissed off that his daughter like was like defiled or whatever. And so he brings out a gun. And then there's also a stalker who has a gun. The last episode ends up in a fucking shootout. And yeah, like it ends up with like the conservative man being like, I've been so fucking emasculated, I've been cucked throughout this whole thing, you know, I can't believe like, you know, you're like with him and you've gotten pregnant by him, and you know, like I feel so betrayed. And he's like, you know, like fully like having a nervous breakdown, and she's like, I love him, you know, I feel things with this man that I've never felt before. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so this whole show is just another show where non-monogamy is used as like a sexy plot point only for monogamy to be reaffirmed at the very end. You know, this is another one of those. Anyway, amongst all the chaos, basically, the conservative lady accidentally ends up shooting her and husband, and you know, the show ends with him kind of being like wheeled away by an ambulance, and she just kind of emotionlessly kind of looking back, and that's how it ends. So, this is why you shouldn't watch it, guys. Like, yeah, I didn't think that a show could be that bad. It really went off the rails. I feel like they tried to exploit every trope in the book. The stalker subplot was insane. It was just really not good. It was not good. And, you know, I feel like we need to have a bigger conversation here about, like, non-monogamous representation in shows, because clearly non-monogamy has gained traction in the past couple years, and you know, it's showing up more and more in a lot of shows, you know, not just like random shows like this on Channel 4, but also more mainstream ones like The White Lotus and Succession and whatever, right? Like even fucking Riverdale ended with like the four of them in a quad. And so the question is, would you rather have representation that is fucking awful, or would you rather have no representation at all? And, you know, like my immediate emotional reaction after watching that show was, I wish this never got made. What the fuck? But, you know, I feel like non-monogamy is, you know, kind of going through a bit of a phase right now in the same way that kind of portrayals of homosexuality in media went through a phase like, you know, a couple decades ago with the Hays Code and everything, where it has to be bad before it gets good. And I feel like we're in the cringy bad phase where, like, you know, non-monogamous people are portrayed as like evil or like cheaters or just like, you know, really sexually inappropriate and obsessed with sex and like just, you know, just unethical, chaotic figures. In the same way that, you know, back then, like gay and trans people in particular were portrayed as like, you know, mentally ill and sick and pedophiles and like whatever, like all of these negative things. But eventually, you know, like as kind of portrayals of them got more nuanced and, you know, it gained more visibility and acceptance and people started talking about it more, then more interesting plots and more interesting characters were made and the representation was eventually good. Which is not to say that there isn't good non-monogamous representation out there right now. I thought BBC's Trigonometry, for example, was really good. You know, I thought that Easy on Netflix, where there was like a, you know, one of the, it followed many, many different plot lines, but one of the plot lines was about a polyamorous couple. I thought that was like brilliantly written. It doesn't end happily, but it was really well written. And, you know, Black Sails was really good. You know, there are bits of Our Flag Means Death that I really enjoyed, right? There's kind of pockets that, you know, show to me that people are starting to get it. This is one of those shows that misses the mark, but, you know, it contributes to just like a wider conversation about non-monogamy that gets people talking about it and gets it, you know, like in front of people's faces as a thing that exists. You know, we've been talking about this among us creators because, like, for those of you who don't know, a lot of the non-monogamous creators, there's like 30 of us, like, in a group chat. We've been just kind of talking about in general about how polyamory has gone from being, like, you know, this weird fetishy thing that we're not allowed to talk about to, oh, this is still kind of niche, but, you know, I know a couple of people who do it now, right? Like, I feel like a lot of people can say that now, unless you live in, well, if you live in a city, I suppose, in more remote areas, it's harder to say. Even though this show was fucking horrible. It was a really interesting kind of study of, like, kind of how non-monogamous people are kind of portrayed and perceived by, you know, people who don't know the culture very well, clearly. And I also thought it was, you know, it still gets the conversation started. The fact that this show is, this drama is being made on Channel 4 and that this is, you know, a compelling plot, like a plotline that they thought that people would be compelled to watch, says a lot. So as much as I hate the show, I think that ultimately poor representation leads to good representation, and that can only be a good thing.